Welcome back to the Second Voice podcast, where we talk about the conversations that leaders don't say out loud. My name is Luisa Hogan and I'm your host. And today I'm joined by the fantastic Adam Kinnest. We have known each other for a long time in various settings, and I just know we're going to have a wonderful conversation. He's a purpose-driven leader who is all about inclusivity and listening, and I know for a fact that he is so good at that. And I wanted to delve into the conversations that Adam has in his mind when you're an empathetic leader and what that sounds like and feels like when you are faced with different situations. What are the kind of conversation that he's having when he's being empathetic, inclusive, and listening in his leadership situations? So Adam, he has brings ideas and innovation and people all together in his leadership. And he has got over 20 years experience in the community space, the business space, government space. He's worked in so many different sectors, and he has become very known for his inclusive way of being, and I can definitely attest to that. He brings a steady hand, a sharp mind, and a sense of purpose to his leadership, and I'm so happy to have you here, Adam. Thank you for joining me. I've given a little bit of a background, but do you want to delve a little bit deeper into what your background is and where you've come from, what you're doing now? What are you up to?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me.
No
it's
worries.
Exciting to be here, and thanks for the introduction. I think it's always a little bit interesting when you hear other people's perspectives of what you do and who you are.
Yeah.
I like to think of myself as a little bit humble, so it can be a little bit challenging to hear. But look, I think you summed it up broadly, but I have had a very diverse career and a very diverse background. So I've worked in everything from business management and hospitality, running venues, cafes, bars, clubs, you name it, both here in WA, across Australia and other parts of the world. And I then moved into innovation, education, and that was sort of, I'm a person who likes to say yes to things, right? So that was taking a leap, taking a chance. That saw me sort of move into that space. That was sort of late 2017 or thereabouts. And I was at university, so I also found university very late in life, studying nursing at the time, but I don't work as a nurse. Later to then do my MBA, which led me into a job at an economic and policy think tank, which was CEDA. And I was there for about 5 years, working across business, industry, and government. And then recently have moved into another member-style organisation, working with Australia's largest engineering peak body, Engineers Australia. So
Amazing.
Very interesting career journey, but it's been a wonderful journey.
Yeah. And you're the general manager there, right? So
I am the general manager.
Yeah, amazing. So such a diverse career, and I mean, I know you. When your bio says that you are a purpose-driven leader and you are great at listening. I so agree with that, because every conversation we've ever had, I've felt so heard by you, but also the way you're able to link different perspectives together and bring ideas together and not be so married to one perspective. So tell me a little bit more about that. What is that skill to you? Is that something that you feel that you do naturally, or is that something you've needed to develop?
I think naturally that's sort of the way I approach things.
Yeah.
I mean, active listening is challenging
Yeah.
for anybody. I think that's the skill that I've had to really learn to harness more. But that sort of connecting ideas and voices and aligning it to purpose, I think naturally, obviously the longer I get through my career, I realize that it is a natural skill that I've had. Mm-hmm. I don't believe it's something that I've had to really learn. Mm-hmm. And for me, I think that's the reason why I've become so good at it is, one, I've been able to identify, and I've had people like yourself sort of acknowledge that, but leaning into those skills as part of being authentic, being an authentic leader and an authentic person, and not trying to be something that I'm not, what other people expect me to be as a leader. And I think that's really challenging when you have different traits as a leader. You're not standard, I would say CEOs and executives, there are some pretty standard traits. I would sit a little outside of that, but I think that's my superpower.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I find that this is a podcast about self-talk, and obviously in your career you've journeyed along, and you talk about like standard CEOs and leaders. Personally, I find sometimes you walk into a room of those kinds of leaders, and there's a lot of ego and bluster in that room. What is your self-talk telling you when you're amongst those kind of leaders, and how do you remain authentic and true to your own superpower, as you say?
Look, that's it's a big question. I think that's always going to be a challenge. It still challenges me now. I still go in with a bit of self-doubt, a little bit of apprehension. I mean, it's that imposter syndrome that rears its head, and you sort of sit there and go, oh, should I even be in this room? What have I got to offer? What's my contribution? I'm not the smartest person in the room. And I think you've got to, for me, it's reminding myself that, I have a seat at the table. I've earned that seat. I've worked really, really hard to be there. And I wouldn't be there if I didn't have something to contribute. And so it's about waiting for that moment, where there's space created to have that contribution heard. Sometimes you got to kind of bully your way in there as well. Just, make yourself known. And sometimes I think it's important to remind yourself to remain silent and to listen, because there's always something to learn from the people around the table. And throughout my career, meeting CEOs, meeting senior leaders, politicians, I think the one thing that I've learned is that everyone is human, and the amount of self-doubt and imposter syndrome and fear that a lot of those people have when they lean into those spaces, you'd be surprised at how that affects those people. And so we're all in the same position. And so I think it's about making sure that you take, as a leader, you allow for people to make mistakes and create that space to listen, to learn from them, but also allow them to make mistakes, right? Yeah. Just because you're a CEO or an exec doesn't mean you're not going to make a mistake. Yeah. So if I allow that, I expect that in return.
Yeah. And I imagine you would be like that with your team too. It's like this, I love that, where you're allowed to make mistakes. Because I've been in teams or with, CEOs who've been, before I got into executive roles, where mistakes weren't allowed, and they would absolutely lose it. They would lose it if people make mistakes. And then now that I've been through the eye of the needle and been in executive roles myself, looking back, I think, how hard would they have been on themselves, right? Like, if they had wanted that perfection from all of us, how much perfection would they have expected out of themselves too, right? It's like, it must be exhausting to be that kind of a leader, right? So, yeah.
I can't imagine. I don't. Yeah. I am hard on myself at times, but I, particularly when it comes to my team or the people around me that I work with, it's really about meeting them where they're at. Yeah. And authentically listening to what they need. As a leader, my job is not to be center of attention. It's not to be the one that is, constantly doing. My job is it's actually a really big responsibility. I'm responsible not only for the output and the results that the team deliver, but creating an environment where they feel empowered that can deliver, make decisions, and if they make a mistake, that they know that they can raise that. Let's have a conversation, But I do put a little bit of framework around decision making and how people do things. So if a mistake happens, then we limit the impact, obviously, on your organizational situation. And really, it's what's the potential risk to the brand? How much money is this going to cost us? And also your own personal, professional brand. So being able to make quick decisions using sort of that framework is something that has really helped me. And that's sort of what I try to impart to my team and the people around me. And then we just close out that loop of feedback if something does go wrong. But again, they've got to feel safe. There's got to be some psychological safety for them to be able to do that, whether they have good outcomes or bad.
Yeah.
And obviously celebrating the good outcomes is really important as well.
For sure.
But to create an environment where they can come and sit and debrief and talk to me.
Yeah.
And we can work together.
How do you control that like inner voice that, while they're debriefing with you and, trying to generate their own solutions, how do you control that inner voice that wants to jump in and provide the answer? Like, what do you tell yourself? Because I know this is sometimes a weakness of mine. I sometimes see a solution and I want to jump in and offer it. And, I do executive coaching, as you know, and like sometimes I can see the answer and I want to provide it. But, it's about reining that in. What are your techniques for reining that in?
It's really difficult.
Yeah.
It's really challenging.
Yeah.
And as someone who's neurodiverse, I tend to be able to see 5 steps ahead and I already know where we're going to be.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's really around that's not my journey to have, that's theirs. If I want to lead them a certain way, it's about asking the right questions at the right intervals. And something I learned from a former CEO who also struggled a little bit with this, and she had a very good technique, which I've now taken on, is I'll sit on my hands.
Amazing, yeah.
And I'll ask myself, why am I speaking?
Yeah.
So I think that helps me as a technique, because absolutely I want to jump in. I'm like, no, this is the whole answer. But that doesn't do anything for them, their growth. And at the end of the day, as a leader, I need reliable, capable individuals around me and for our organization. So it's super important that their growth is at the forefront of those conversations rather than me providing answers and direction.
Yeah. So it can be a real challenge. And I think, for anyone listening who's at the start of their leadership journey, it's a key skill, I think, to learn and also to not rush, because it's that feeling of, if I just tell them, it's quicker. Like, it's quicker than allowing them to go and discover for themselves and fail and come back and learn. But at the same time, it might be quicker in the short term, but in the long run, they've learnt nothing, right? And, the long-term outcomes are far better if you allow people to fail and fail excellently, is what I like to call it. It's like you fail excellently, which means you fail and then you learn from it and you come back stronger. So that's a real challenge for new leaders.
I think, yeah, you're right. And I think the other challenge that I'm seeing is we have this productivity issue in Australia right now. And so, unfortunately, a lot of new leaders are translating this through their teams as more work at a faster pace, rather than taking a step back and assessing the tools, techniques, and skills and capability of themselves, as well as the people around them, to try and uplift that capability and that productivity. And so I think this is where a lot of leaders are just jumping in, doing stuff, or they're finding others that can do it quickly, thinking that is the answer to their productivity challenge. But actually, it is investing in your people long term. It's that long term providing that space for them to either fail or succeed, but making sure that you are, guiding and nurturing and creating that space where you can meet them where they're at.
Yeah, 100%. I find people struggle with that concept so much because, there's that fear of failure, perfectionism that comes into it. That's, time, wanting to do things quickly. And a lot of leaders really struggle with that. And even hearing us talk about it, we're probably going, yeah, that's easy for you, but I've got all these 50 KPIs and I can't afford to do that, right? So it's a real challenge. And also I love the way you said that, productivity is an issue, but productivity isn't about, doing more with less time. So for those that aren't sure of that, can you explain that? Because I know you'll know the answer to this. Can you explain that difference in productivity?
So really, to increase productivity really is around investing not just in the tools. So obviously technology has enabled us to be more productive, but also in the uplift of capability in your people. And I think, what we've seen over the last sort of 15 years is there's been a decrease of investment in either leadership training, training and development as a whole in our people, but that is where we get more productivity output because the capability uplifts. And then obviously as new technology comes in, it's always looking at how we can do, more with less, but in the frame of using the technology we have. And obviously AI is a really big conversation right now. But there aren't just productivity gains there with that tool. It's still going to take a little bit of time. It actually takes a little bit more time to use AI effectively. Yeah. I really, empower my people to use it, but use it almost like grad.
Yeah.
Right? Sense check the work. Yeah. Use it as a starting point, so you're not starting with a blank page essentially. But it takes a bit more time for input, so you get better quality output from the technology. Yeah. But then going back to that learning and development is that you have to teach your people how to use it. Then you have to create a safe environment for them to feel like it's okay to use this tool, because it's, ideally doing things faster, higher quality, more output, more productivity, right? So it's not about doing more with less hours or more with less. It's about effectively using the tools and technology correctly, but also making sure that as a leader you're investing in that learning and development, and knowing that is, it takes time. Carve out an entire day of learning for your people. It is an investment, but even if that person leaves in 12 months' time, that person's capability is uplifted, which means that particularly in a place like Western Australia where, small pool of employed people all working, we sort of hop around companies a little bit here, everyone's going to benefit.
Yeah, 100%. I'm going to pause it there because I'm a little bit concerned that we're not close enough. You can lean back. I'm just moving it a little bit forward just in case. Closer. Because we're recording. You can stay like that. We're just recording on a video instead of through Zencaster for me today because they couldn't set it up for me. Normally a Zencaster would do the balancing, but I'm just doing a video, so I just want to make sure that we're not too different.
Yep.
Right? Okay, we'll reset that. Would you would, I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Would you call yourself an empathetic leader?
I would.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, but I've also had to really understand what type of empathetic leader I am, because I think people mix empathy up with, I feel how you feel. I lead through empathy. And for me, the principle of that is creating space for others to learn, to fail, but also to help meet where they're at. I've come into a new organization. I spent 5 years with a previous team and who were highly capable, but also had to, learn ways of working. And now I've come into another team who are, highly capable, but the organization's going through transformation. And so I see an opportunity to help uplift them and their capability to meet the challenges of, our new strategy and where we want to go, but they're not quite there. So I need to just lead with empathy, which is creating space, having honest and open conversations and listening before I make decisions on, okay, how am I going to train, develop them? Are they the right people in the right spots? All of those are questions we ask ourselves as leaders. And there's that challenge of not wanting to move too slowly, wanting just, let's get it done. But you absolutely have to take your time.
Yeah. Does that ever drain you? Do you ever feel emotionally drained by doing that?
I would say I've had a lot of really big lessons probably in the last 3 years or so in how to departmentalize more of that. Prior to that, I would say absolutely really draining.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge I had was I couldn't understand why the leaders around me, my leaders at the time, didn't lead the same way. because I felt like it got better results. But again, their leadership style is their leadership style. Mine is different. And so it was really frustrating, really challenging. And I was constantly felt like I was, swimming against the tide a little bit. But it's about acknowledging the things you can impact and change and acknowledging the things that are completely out of your control. I can't control. And this is a lesson that, we talked about many years ago about what is within my control. Yeah. And so that's the ongoing challenge. But understanding that allows me to sort of acknowledge in myself, okay, this is becoming quite exhausting, and I'm constantly worried about how this person might perceive this conversation or what's happening in their life, and all those things are important, but I'm also an individual, and I'm also, a person who has feelings and their own challenges, and I've got to put as much time into myself as I do the people around me. Yeah.
That's quite something, and I love that conversation we had all those years ago, and it was like a real aha moment, I feel like, but it is a journey in your self-talk around, switching from that, like, why aren't you like better at this? Like, it's not hard, and then switching to that, okay, well, they're on their journey, and changing your self-talk around that, because it is easy to get into that like negative loop of feeling like it's so unfair, and, I want people to just, be a little bit more empathetic like I am, and be a little bit more caring about how other people are around me. But sometimes it is about looking at it and going, this is out of my control, and I can only control what's, what I can do, right? So like, I know that shift happened within you. Did that take some practice afterwards to get that right? Or was it like a switch, an aha moment, and then it like, it was easier to change that narrative inside your mind after that?
It took a little while, and I think the other side of that conversation was also really understanding my values and my values as a leader. And so coupling that with that sort of acknowledgement of everyone's on their own journey, I think was super important. So understanding what I value was transparent communication. I think that more than anything is the number one value for me, because I have other values and traits, but that one, I think, for me, identifying that that's what I need from others, and that's because that's what I provide, is super important. And actually, I was actually asked that question when I came into my previous role around how I want to be led, which was a great change of speed. I had leaders like, how do you want to be led? Yeah. And I made it very clear that transparent communication is the number one value I have. And so lead me through transparency and clear communication. And that really helped be able to manage any, future conflicts or challenges that I faced with my leader. And so I think that plus the empathy piece and really taking that in partnership with one another is super important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up transparency, because I was only just talking about that the other day around, I feel like one of the key values in leadership and in building trust in leadership and going through change, I do culture change programs, going through change is transparency. And sometimes transparency, even if you can't disclose something, it can be something as simple as, I can't tell you that today, but this is when I will be able to tell you that. And it's about being transparent about that rather than covering up. And it's interesting how you get leaders who are very good at that and value that, and others who really struggle with that and have this, again, it's self-talk, this justification inside their minds as to why that's not possible. Why can't I be more transparent? And so I always find it refreshing when I meet, leaders such as you who value that and find ways to make that work, because it's not possible to tell every single person every single detail all the time, right? Like, some things are confidential and so forth, but there are ways to be more transparent. How do you manage that, when there are things that are maybe tricky, we can't really disclose that? How do you maintain that inner value of transparency yourself?
I think it's sort of what you've already called out. It's about acknowledging the elephant in the room, right? without divulging the critical details. I think it's a journey though. It takes a little bit of time to build that trust. And so providing, non-critical information that is not confidential or could be detrimental to those around you. But, I think naturally a lot of leaders will just gatekeep anyway. So I don't do that. And so I share as much as I can. So when it comes time to provide just a clear directive, or when it comes time to say, I want to acknowledge that, but I can't give you the information today, but I need you to be on board. But it comes down to, at the end of that process, is I circle back and explain to them why. It's always closing out that communication loop. At the end is super important, because that's where, again, you create that space where your people can say, okay, I understand that, and I did what you asked, but it was challenging and this is why.
Yeah.
And it also allows me to reiterate, this is the way that we're working. We've agreed on this way of working. So when I, thank you, acknowledging that they've trusted me to just take action because I've given them a directive, I've acknowledged the elephant in the room, and I've closed out the loop. So I think it becomes easier when you do have to gatekeep information, if you've laid the foundation of trust and transparency at the start, as much as possible, because you get less resistance from the people around you, because they know deep down, if Adam could tell me, he would tell me.
Yeah.
But clearly he cannot tell me.
Yeah.
But he's asking me to do this, so I'm going to do it. I have trust in my leader.
Yeah, that's so true. It's like, start the way you mean to go on, and then there is no second guessing or cynicism around that. But you're still going to get pushback, right? Sometimes you're going to get pushback. Like, what is your self-talk, or what is your inner voice saying? How do you deal with pushback internally so that you don't feel like you failed? And, what do you do in those situations?
Yeah, it's really challenging, because I think, like anybody, I absolutely can spiral and go, oh, why? And I get frustrated. I think it's just taking 5 minutes to remove yourself, go for a walk if you can, leave the office, if you're at home, get up from your desk, go outside, take 5 minutes to breathe, decompress, and just, again, go back to that. What is within my control?
Yeah.
Right? I can't control that other person's reaction. And for me, it's around resetting. Clearly, if there's resistance, I need to ask myself, did I communicate correctly? Do they have everything they need? Like, was I not clear about the situation? And so then I go back and actually set time to, speak with that person. Just want to be clear. Have I been clear? Do you have everything you need? What are the challenges that you see with this? And it becomes a bit of a negotiation about meeting me part way. And then, if it's business critical, then it becomes a directive, and you just need to manage that like any normal situation. That can be confrontational, but ultimately my inner voice is about stepping out, taking a deep breath, going back and assessing what I've done that may have impacted that outcome. And if I need to, I'll go back and talk to them. And if not, well, you've got to take it one step at a time.
Yeah, you do. Do you have like mantras or things that you repeat to yourself when you when you might feel like you need to be defensive? I mean, I don't know anyone who does not get defensive instantly in the moment, and then the emotion might pass. Do you have any tips or tricks that you use to make sure you stay on the path of listening and, being empathetic, all of those skills that you've built up? Like, what do you tell yourself?
Adam, sit on your hands. Why are you speaking?
Yeah.
But for me, I'm human, so that is a challenge, and it's an ongoing challenge. But it's reminding myself that, particularly as a leader, that how I react and how I act will have an impact on the people around me. Mm-hmm. Even if those people aren't in my direct team, even if I've never met that person or, my position impacts everybody in the organization. And so I have to stop and remind myself that what I'm about to say, will that add value to this conversation? Will it detract from the purpose of what we're trying to achieve? And does it really need to be said out loud and right now?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's around impact, intent, and will it add value or not?
Yeah.
And if I walk away and I go, I really should have said something, it's usually to a person. It's usually to the situation. There's always someone leading that. And it's just asking to set some time and go, hey, you open to a conversation. It didn't sit well with me and this is why, or this is what I see is going to be the barrier. So yeah, for me, it's just, why am I talking? Am I going to add value to this conversation right now? And is this the right space to have this conversation?
I mean, how then do you stop it going the other way, where it's like too much listening and not enough decision making? Because there's a balance. Because, I've been caught in this trap before. In my leadership journey many years ago, where it's like I'm learning how to make sure that I'm being inclusive and listening to everyone's opinion and getting a lot of buy-in. But if you do that too much, you spend so much time trying to get everybody having a consensus that no decision is made, and then people get frustrated with you as a leader too, because it's too much the other way. So what are the techniques that you have to make sure that you've got that balance of listening, empathy, but then, okay, now's time for me to make a decision, and some people aren't going to like that and I've just got to make the call. What do you tell yourself?
I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of the process.
Yeah.
It's actually verbalizing that process though.
Yeah.
So it might seem like a really simple thing to do, but stepping into a conversation or a meeting, particularly with an agenda, but being very clear up front with the people in that room to say, right, so this is why we're here. And ideally, before we leave this room, I'm going to make a decision, or we need to make a decision. So we're not going to leave the room until we make a decision, because it's critical. And so let's create an open conversation. But ultimately, at the end of this hour, it doesn't mean you won't go back and you won't have some back and forth, but an agreement on the outcome of that discussion is super important. And if that is we're here to make a decision, and you don't need everybody involved in that decision making either.
Yeah.
But you do have to create the space again for people to be able to come to you and say, hey, why was I not included in that conversation? So you've got to be very clear around why you're excluding individuals from those types of conversations, and or why you're including others.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've only been in this new role for 12 weeks, and it's taken a bit of time for me to learn this technique of making decisions quickly. And so I've had to make a few decisions quite quickly. And what was interesting was to get the feedback from the team to go, oh, how did you come to that so quickly? We need to sit and we need to talk through this. And so I'm sharing my process, my framework, like what's the impact of the brand and the business? Yeah. Is it costing us anything, and will this have an impact on our professional brands or personal brands?
Yeah.
No, it's minimal.
Yeah.
So looking at our strategic plan and where we need to be, this doesn't serve that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm happy to revisit it, but right now a decision has to be made, and I made it.
Yeah. I mean, I always love going back to Patrick Lencioni. I love his work and I love his books. Anyone listening, look up Patrick Lencioni if you haven't already. But, he says this thing where if everybody weighs in, you get buy-in. And it doesn't mean everybody has to agree, right? Like, it's just if everybody has the opportunity to authentically say what they think about the thing, without us needing to come to a consensus, you're actually, as the leader, get put in a position where you can make the decision without everyone having consensus, and because everyone feels heard by you. And I just love that you're naturally doing that, and I'm hearing what you say, and I'm like, well, that's the environment that you create, and then if people have problems with that, you talk them through the process and where that came in, and people are like, oh, okay, yeah, I see that. And I think that's such an important element of leadership, and I love that you talk about that as part of your own process. It's That's really good. I've always loved that about you, actually. You're really good at that. In terms of, your experience, like you've worked in community, you've worked in government, you've worked in a whole bunch of areas. What's been like the thing that's mattered? I mean, you've touched on this, but, if you had to say the number one thing now, you mentioned earlier transparency, but what's the number one thing now that's weaved through all of your leadership that you think is the number one priority for you in terms of, it could be values, but that comes up in your mind all the time?
So it'd be my why.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Purpose and impact.
Yeah.
And I think for me, when you start out, you think having impact is this big thing. And ultimately, for me, it's around making sure that when I'm gone, that I've helped contribute to a bigger change. Now, I think, maybe my ambition should be bigger, but ultimately I'm not going to be, they're not going to build statues in my honor, and that's not what I want out of my career. I would like to look back on my legacy and my career knowing that that person I created space for and helped develop became something bigger, and they had impact. The people around me, the organizations that I work for, are all looking to have positive impact, not just on the communities or the people they represent, but also on Australia as a whole. I mean, in 25 years, where are we going to be as a nation? We've got so many challenges. And we talk about Australia being the lucky country, but we have a lot of challenges. And I think if we're not addressing them now, we're going to be in some pretty big trouble in 25 years. And so I want to be a part of that. Everything that I do, I want it to have impact, and I want it to mean something. And I think for me, it was less intentional, I think, at the very start of my sort of journey. But absolutely it has become the core of my decision-making in who I work for, the things that I do, and the people that I surround myself with is all about impact and purpose.
Yeah. And I love how that's created for you such a diverse career, because you haven't followed this like straight career path. You have zigzagged through many different opportunities, and it's one thing I've always enjoyed talking. Every time I talk to you, you've got a new interest, or you're like following a new path, you're looking into new options that feels right for you. But the one thing that's weaved in all of it, from my perspective, is you finding that, purpose-driven leadership, and it's so accurate of you. It's, you're finding a way to have that impact. Because you have this amazing background too, before coming into leadership, You've come a long way, such a long way in your leadership, and I've absolutely loved that about you. So what's, in terms of self-talk, like you talked about self-doubt earlier, what's the negative self-talk that still holds you back today?
Look, I think I sort of said earlier around, lots of CEOs and executives and leaders have that imposter syndrome, and I still struggle with that. I still struggle with, I'm a country kid who grew up in a working class family. My parents still live in social housing. I didn't have all of the same opportunities even most kids get now. I've had to really work hard, but what that also comes with is a bit of baggage of, am I good enough? Do I deserve to be here? Is what I'm saying valuable? What gives me the right to have that sort of opinion? I'm not an expert. I'm working in engineering now. I'm not an engineer.
Yeah.
I worked in public policy before that. Yep. I didn't have a public policy background before that. I worked in education and innovation. Didn't have a background in that. So, for me, it's saying yes to the challenges. That movie that's got Jim Carrey, and he just says yes for a year.
Oh, yep.
That's me.
Yeah.
My whole career has been yes.
Yeah.
just take that challenge. But again, that comes with that self-doubt that, I'm taking a leap and I don't know what's there. But I think at the end of the day, if you look at anyone around you, it's who you surround yourself with. So I have been lucky enough to surround myself with really positive people, and that's made a difference, who encourage me and remind me that absolutely I should be there. Mm-hmm. Absolutely what I have to add is valuable. And I think I just hold on to that.
Amazing. That is such a cool message to give to everybody, because so many people out there would be, like you said, you're general manager for Engineers Australia, you're not an engineer. And so many people will be like, I'm not applying for that, I'm not an engineer. But you recognise you've got so much more to give and so many skills that are so valuable in that space. Same with public policy. Like every time you've gone for a role, it's not been in something you have a degree in or anything like that. And so many people hold themselves back, and I love that you sit here going, I have self-doubt. But, from an outside perspective, people looking at your career and, you taking those opportunities, it looks like you've got no self-doubt at all. I'm going to put my name down for this role, even though I don't have a background in this, and I'm going to give it a go. And I'm going to get that job, and then I'm going to excel at it, and I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be amazing and meet amazing people. I know this about you. Like every time I meet you, I'm like, you met who? And you've spoken to this person? They're on your speed dial? Like I'm just blown away by that, because people would never dream of putting themselves out there like that, So I just love that message. If you're listening, take a leaf from Adam's book. He's saying here, I've got self-doubt, but I still put myself out there. Like, how do you push yourself? Is it just like I'm gonna try? What have you got to lose? What's the voice that tells you to try anyway?
Look, absolutely. Just take a leap. Just do it. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen?
They're going to say no. That's the worst.
Exactly. And look, working in innovation, I pitched and created my own innovation device, and so I've stood on stages and I've pitched ideas. Mm-hmm. When you're pitching ideas to your leaders or your CEO, or people will tell you no, or hey, you have no idea what you're talking about. That's going to happen. Yeah. But one thing I think, in addition to all of that I've sort of really, again, probably in the last sort of 6-7 years, is stop comparing yourself to other people. And that is a really hard thing to do, because I do it, and I catch myself doing it sometimes. But that's more out of, I think, admiration and aspiring to be like those people or the traits that they have, rather than, I must be at that level. But you are who you are. Your style of your leadership is your style. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be the same as everybody else's. And I was lucky enough to hear a senior leader speak about her leadership style recently, and everything she said resonated with me, because it was the first time I'd ever heard a senior executive talk about leading with empathy, being human, just all of those. Like, we're all human, but that's how she leads. And she leads one of the world's largest engineering consulting firms. And just to think to myself, here's a mum, she's worked her way up the chain, but she's always remained authentic to who she is and who she is as a leader. And so, hear lots of carbon copies of leadership styles all over the place. And that was the first time I'd heard anyone talk about what I see as valuable as a leader. And it was just so refreshing. But that is the first time in probably my entire career. Yeah. So, but it reminded me that I don't have to be like everybody else.
No. It's that difference between destructive comparison and constructive.
Yep.
I think you nailed it. It's like, it's fine to compare yourself to someone if it's around, I aspire to have those, that impact or that value, but not in that destructive way of they're better than me. It's a competition, and, and again, it's a fine line, because too much comparison can get you into trouble, because you're you feel like a failure if you're not meeting up to that. And, such an important message there.
And I think it's really important to call out that you don't have to be a general manager or CEO to be a leader.
Mm.
And I think we do get caught up in this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another sort of message I try and put out to the people around me and my teams is that you're all leaders.
Mm-hmm.
People are looking up to you, whether it's within your organization or not. They're looking to you. So think about who you want to be, even if you don't want to be a CEO, in your organization, in your life. I think it's really important to remember that people are watching.
Mm.
And so, you don't have to be leading organizations to be a leader.
No.
So,
and that's what I really wanted to put out in this podcast too. So I want people listening who might not have the executive title or the title and who are holding themselves back because they think people with the titles have just all of this amazing self-control and perfection in their minds and all this confidence. And, the reality is we don't.
100%.
Well, and you said it perfectly earlier. You've met like politicians and senior execs and like at high levels and you realize that they're all human. And if the minute you realize, it's actually a relief, when you realize that. I was coaching somebody the other day about, networking, and she's terrified of networking. And I said to her, I'm guaranteeing you 70% of people in that room are terrified of networking and they're so worried about how they look. They're not even bothered by you standing in the corner looking awkward, because she's like, I just feel so awkward and they're all looking at me being awkward. I'm like, they're absolutely not doing that. Like nobody does that, even the high up senior level people, like they feel those fears. So yeah, thanks for sharing that and reminding us. So any final tips? Like, these conversations always go so fast for me, but like final tips, one thing that you'd like to leave the audience with for, you've had so many gold nuggets in there anyway, but.
Well, be kind to yourself,
yeah.
I think is a really important message, but also making sure that you do what brings you joy.
Yeah.
And I think naturally you will find where you fit, you will lead the way you want to lead, and hopefully, you have impact in everything that you do.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining
you.
me today and for taking time out of your busy schedule in a new role that you're still getting to know. I really appreciate you being here with me. And, for everyone listening, what I got from today was that it's not about silencing our inner voice. Alan, I'm calling you Alan. I'm now going to start that bit again. For everyone listening, I just wanted to say that what I got out of today's conversation is really that it's not about silencing our inner voice. And as Adam so perfectly put it, it's about learning to hear that inner voice, but also control it and bring in kinder words to ourselves and be kind to ourselves. And also recognizing that empathy is around understanding that everyone around us is also human in the same way that we are. And our negative self-talk is not unique to us. Everyone has a bit of it. And sometimes just listening to each other and being kind to ourselves and to each other can make a world of difference. So thank you, Adam. We will see you next time at our next episode. Take care. Well done.
Thank you.